days before Yom Kippur. What else can we speak about if not tshuva, purification, and how far we have to go in order to do this mitzvah, the mitzvah of tshuva. Let's start with an interesting halachic discussion. Does one, have to endanger himself, to risk his life in order to fulfill the mitzvah of teshuva? We know that normally all the mitzvahs one doesn't have to give over his life for, except for the 3 cardinal sins. Giluy arayos, shfichus damim, avodah zorah. But what about the mitzvah of tshuva? The all or none principle. Does it apply to the mitzvah of tshuva or not? You can unmute yourself and try to participate. What do you say, my friends? The mitzvah of tshuva, does it require mesirus nefesh or not? What do you say?
Definitely, without a doubt.
Wow.
I would say no.
What about the 3 cardinal sins that we know that one has to give over his life, but we don't know that there's other additional mitzvahs that applies to as well?
אין לי מסמכים, אבל I'm sure you do.
We definitely need documentations to tell a person he has to give over his life. Let's make it, let's pinpoint it to what we're talking about exactly. A person who's always used to, let's say, eating chazer. And then he realizes the Torah says this is no good. Yom Kippur comes around. And the doctor is telling him, listen, if you're going to stop eating the chazer, this is dangerous for you. For the process of tshuva, does he have to stop eating chazer? And we don't care that it's going to be a very, very dangerous condition. Or should we say, it's not one of the 3 major sins, and he doesn't have to stop eating the chazer. Gesundheit, keep eating! Put some ketchup and salt, will probably be a little tastier. What do you say?
He should keep eating.
Keep eating. What bracha do you want him to say?
I don't know, but it says chai b'chem. Chai b'hem.
V'chai b'hem v'lo sheyamus b'hem. Is that what we learn from that pasuk? That pasuk we learn in Maseches Yuma Peivav teaches us that if you have to violate Shabbos in order to save a person, we do. Because we'd like the person to continue keeping many Shabbosim in the future. So we will violate one Shabbos to make sure that he will continue living and fulfilling many other mitzvahs and observing many Shabbosim. Do we tell a person, go eat chazer? A very surprising answer is found in Reb Chaim Mivoloshin, in a drasha that he gave the first day of Slichos in Sam Nefesh HaChaim. This is printed. And he writes a major chiddush. For the mitzvah of tshuva, sometimes one has to be moiser nefesh. Reb Chaim Mivoloshin writes about a case similar to ours. A person who is accustomed to doing a certain aveira, and if chas v'sholom, he stops this aveira, and he wants to do tshuva with a sincere heart, it will be dangerous for him. Says Reb Chaim Mivoloshin, maybe even if he's going to have to die, af al pi chen yekabel alav gam mesirus nefesh. Where did Reb Chaim Mivoloshin get this from? He darshans a pasuk in the Torah. V'shavta ad Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha. You should return to Hashem your God. Do tshuva. What are these extra words here? B'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha. Oh, wait a second. B'chol nafshecha, we know this word. These words, we say them every single day in Shema. And what does it mean? What does that mean? B'chol nafshecha? Afilu hu noiteles nafshecha. Even if you have to die for a Kodesh Baruch Hu, says a Chaim Mivoloshin, the same thing would apply here. Otherwise, why did the Torah write these words of B'chol nafshecha by the mitzvah of teshuva? To tell you, even if we noitel your nefesh by doing teshuva, even though you are obligated to do teshuva. Now that is a wild chiddush. But we must be medayek in the words of Reb Chaim Mivoloshin, and Reb Chaim Mivoloshin is not saying if a person is surely going to die, he still must be moiser nefesh. He is probably talking about a certain level of mesirus nefesh, a certain level of risk that is involved. But otherwise, if it's a vadai misa, only in the 3 averos chamuros. However, in the Yavitz in his Siddur Beis Yankiv, Seder Shriva Ois Yud Beis, he writes that there is certain things that one started intentionally, and now he can stop the sin. Make sure that it doesn't come into fruition. He must risk himself But there too, it's clear that we're not talking about a clear, imminent danger. Chashash sakana, where there's a little danger involved. But listen to this, the smak, in mitzvah gimel, brings a raya, he brings a proof from a certain ma'aseh that happened with Rabbeinu Yehuda HaChassid, when Yehuda HaChassid, Sefer Chassidim, one of the greatest Rishonim. He instructed to his Talmidim a tshuva path, that they should go into danger. Says the Smak, he brings from Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, that he warned his Talmidim once not to go to a certain wedding, because there are dangerous people along the way. It's dangerous, don't go. But they did. Why did they go? Because they knew how to say the name of Hashem, the holy name of Hashem, Kabbalah, and they knew it would protect themselves. And in fact, they went and they mentioned the Kodesh Baruch Hu's name, the holy name, and they were saved. When they came back to Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, he told them, Shkoyach, but you should know, you just lost your world to come. If you don't do this again, and you come back without mentioning the holy name, should be moiser nefesh, to be killed. And they did, and they were killed. That is what the Smak says. But there too, it's only midas chasidus. That is what the Smak is talking over there. He wants to prove that even in a place that our sages say, Yavo ve'al yahareg, for all the other mitzvahs that you do not have to give over your life, one who says, no, I'm willing to be killed and not to transgress the sin, he is not punished because his kavanah is lashamayim, but tzedakah techashev lo, is considered as if he did a mitzvah. So a very surprising answer. There is some element of risk that one is allowed to go to in order to fulfill the mitzvah of tshuva. So let's talk about tshuva. There was a famous Rebbitzin, there is a famous Rebbitzin in Eretz Yisrael that she goes abroad all over. And she is mekarev many, many people. She gives lectures all over. Baruch Hashem, she brought many people back. Last year, this Rebbitzin had a flight. She's going to the States in the middle of the night. So she wants to catch a little nap before the flight. She called a cab and she asked him to come at 2 a.m. to pick her up. But she didn't hear her alarm clock. And she slept right through. The cab driver comes and he starts honking. And he calls her and calls her, and finally she wakes up. She says, Rebbitzin, where are you? I'm waiting already 20 minutes. And she says, oh, I'm so sorry, I overslept. And she quickly gets her bag and she gets organized, she gets dressed, and she runs downstairs. When she opened the door, she realizes the big black garbage bag that she left there, and she figured, my husband is a big tzaddik, it's not proper, it's not for his kavod to take the garbage down. So she took the garbage down as well. And she comes down and the cab driver starts yelling her, Rebbitzin, it's 35 minutes. You think I have the whole day for you? Come in, get into the cab already. She says, okay, just wait a second. I have to go to the other side. She wants to throw the garbage. And he says to her, Rebbitzin, there's no time for it now. You're going to miss your flight. Get into the cab already. And there was so much pressure. She put her bag, said everything, and the big black garbage bag in the car was gone. They rushed to the airport. And the Rebbitzin was really afraid she's going to miss her flight. They get to the airport, and so much pressure, she didn't realize what she's doing. She took the suitcase, she took the carry-on, and she took some bags, including the big black garbage bag. She goes in and she puts the bag and everything else on the X-ray machine, and it starts smelling. And the people come over, the security. And they start telling her, why is this beeping? And they're looking, and there's empty tuna cans and other cans and other. This is garbage, lady. What are you doing? What are you doing? Are you okay? You brought a garbage bag to the airport. This is what you want to take abroad. You're going to the States. Don't you think they have enough of their own garbage? You have to bring them holy garbage from Eretz HaKodesh. What are you doing? And she felt so embarrassed, and more people came over to see this crazy lady who's schlepping garbage bag from Israel to the States. All the security men, they all came to see this. She was so ashamed, so embarrassed. And then, they thought she's not normal. She apologized. She said, I didn't realize. And all she wanted to do, what she wanted to happen that minute is the earth should open up its mouth and she should be swallowed. But then she went on the plane, she boarded, and after a few minutes, she forgot about the whole thing. if this Rebbitzin had such embarrassment from some people she doesn't even know, she'll probably never see again, because they saw that she's carrying garbage with her. Can you imagine the embarrassment, the shame that one will have if he comes to Yom Kippur with his big bag of garbage, all the averos that he still didn't do tshuva for? One comes with this big bag of diburim asurim, the wrong words that he said, re'iyos asuros, or he saw what he wasn't allowed to see or to hear, and they will tell him, what? You brought the garbage here? Why didn't you get rid of it on the way? We have to get rid of our garbage, my friends. During Yom Kippur, I think most of us, we feel elevated. We feel purified. But many people ask themselves, how is it that we just passed this magnificent day? HaKadosh Baruch Hu purifies Klal Yisrael, and then just a few days after, we feel right back where we were before. We don't feel this purification, and then we start thinking, wait a second, maybe the tshuva wasn't accepted. Maybe I wasn't purified. Maybe the purification is only for tzaddikim. Especially being that the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva Perek Beis Halacha Beis writes, what is tshuva? Sheyazav achoyte cheto, that the sinner should leave his sin. V'yasir mimachshavto v'yigmor belivo shelo yaseh. One should have in his heart that I'm never doing this again. And he should regret what he did in the past. So much so. Until HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself can testify about this person that he will never repeat this sin. This is very difficult. And many people think to themselves, made so many mistakes, so many averos in the past. I wish I could go back in a time tunnel a few years back, and then I wouldn't sin. I would be in much better shape. What is the answer to all these questions? So first, let's explain what's the purification process that HaKadosh Baruch Hu purifies Klal Yisrael, and then maybe we will see why it doesn't affect us. We all know the last nation of Maseches Yuma Daf Pei Amud Beis. Amar Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva taught, Ashreichem Yisrael, praiseworthy are you, Klal Yisrael, Lifnei mi atem mitarim. Before whom do you purify yourselves? Mi metair esrem, who purifies you? Avichem sheba shomayim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, your Father in heaven. And Rabbi Akiva says, Ma mikveh metair es atmeim, just like a mikveh purifies those who are impure, who go in. Af HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, metair es Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu purifies Klal Yisrael. A person who goes into the mikveh, he is tov. He is pure. The impurity that he had before has no meaning to him. He is completely pure. The Torah testifies that he's pure. And on that, Rabbi Akiva says, you should know. One day after Yom Kippur, even the greatest Bar Averos, he is pure, just like an impure person who went into the mikveh. So how does tshuva help? And why do we merit to get this purification? And say a mashal. One of the servants of the king decided one day he's going to break into the safe of the king. He's going to take all the silver and gold. He's going to run away from this place. He's going to become very rich. Maybe one day he will be a king. But in order for this to work, he needed somebody from the inside. And he was talking to the king's son, and he tried to convince him to go along with him. It wasn't successful. But he continued, persisted, and with time, the king's son decided that this may be a great idea. And they had a great plan how to do this. Even though they thought it was a great plan, they were caught. And they were put in jail. And then they came to their court case in front of the king. They both regretted what they did. And they said, we did a foolish thing and we regret it. We're so sorry. And the king decided that they're going to hang his slave and they're going to release his son. And everybody heard this, realized this is discrimination. They both have the same sin. So why is it that they released the king's son and they punished the slave? So the king had to explain. And he said, the slave doesn't really care about me. He cares only about himself. When he broke into my safe, he showed that he's not loyal. And now he's regretting it. It's not real regretting. He's afraid of the punishment. If he could have, he would have done it again. But my son, When he regrets it, he is sincere. Doesn't want anything bad to happen to me. He stumbled. He followed this slave. But once he realized what he did, his remorse is sincere. A Yid is a son of a king. And he really desires to do HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will, but what can you do? We have a Yetzer Hara. But when we regret, when we sincerely regret what we did, that is our true essence. And then all the sins of the entire year just disappear. A person like that deserves purification. Like the Rambam writes in Hilchos Gerushin, in Perek Beis, Halacha Kaf. If one doesn't want to give a get to his wife, and he needs to, what do we do to him? We beat him up until he says, Roi Seani, I want to. What do you mean, I want to? No, you don't. It's hurting, you're bleeding. That's what you say, Roi Seani, you want? Says the Rambam, no. Now his real essence, his real self comes out and says, yes, I want, because a Yid wants to do HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will. Now that he was beaten up, his real Yetzer comes out and says, yes, the Yetzer HaTov says, I want to do HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will. So a Yid really wants to do HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will. That is his essence. And only because we have a Yetzer Hara that sometimes beats us. But when we regret, that is our true colors. A person like that deserves purification. That is what we ask from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we daven in Yom Kippur and we say, I sin in front of you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, erase it with your great mercy. But not by afflictions. When a person has afflictions, he's hurting. He does tshuva and he regrets. But we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we should merit to regret without the Yisurim. We should come to full recognition as a HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we need to do what he wants us to do. So we shouldn't have to express our essence by having affliction. You know, there was a couple that came to the Rav, wanted to get divorced. The wife said that her husband hurt her badly. And the Rav asked, what did he do? And she told him. The Rav asked him, why did you do what she says you did? And the husband tried to give all kinds of explanations and excuses. The rabbi heard him and said, listen, I hear what you say, but your wife is right. You are wrong. You need to try and appease her. It was very difficult for the husband to try and appease his wife, so he tried to give all kinds of explanations and excuses. And the Rav said, listen, I hear what you're saying. I understand it's very difficult, but there's no choice. You are wrong. She is right. Ask her forgiveness. And even though it was very difficult for this husband, he asked his wife for forgiveness. And he says, listen, I realized I made a mistake. I ask you, please forgive me. I will never do this again. And Baruch Hashem, Shalom Bayis was restored. A few months later, this Rav meets this fellow, the husband, and he asks him, so how's it going? And the guy says, not very well. Not very well at all. It's not the same. And the Rav says, but why? Why is it? The husband says, my wife keeps mentioning to me what happened in the past. She doesn't let it go. And the rabbi calls the wife and he says to her, why is it that you keep telling your wife, your husband, what he did in the past? He asked you. He asked your forgiveness. The wife said, yes, that's true. Forgave him. But I still feel it deep in my heart. Can't get rid of it. So the rabbi asked her, tell me, what would happen if you would get divorced? And then you would remarry someone else. Would you mention to the new husband what the previous one did? Would you keep telling him then, oh, so hurt, I'm so hurt? And the wife says, of course not. It's a new husband. What's his connection to what my previous husband did? And the rabbi told her, you should know. It is very difficult for your husband to say, I'm sorry to you. But once he did, and he regret what he did, he is a different person. You should never mention to him what he did. The Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva Perek Beis Halacha David paskins that a person who's about tshuva is counted as a different person. It's a new entity. The Rambam says, Ani acher ve'eni oiso ha'isha asa oisan ha'ma'asim. You have to look back at the other person, the one who did those sins before you did tshuva. He said, who is that? That's not me. Adam acher, he's a different person. Yom Kippur is such a special day that every Yid gets special koyach from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to express his pnimius, his essence. and to regret everything you did, and to say, my emes, my premius is that of Yom Kippur. The entire year I have a mask on, but I really do desire to be pure and to be close to the King on Yom Kippur. In fact, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can testify every Yid that if it would be Yom Kippur every single day of the year, he would never sin again. And anyone who regrets on Yom Kippur, his tshuva is accepted. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu purifies him just like the mikveh purifies those who are impure. A person who thinks to himself, oh, wish I could go back in time, not to sin. The answer to that is on Yom Kippur, you go back in time. You become a new person, a new mensch. It's as if you're going back to your youth. If that's the case, so why don't we feel it after Yom Kippur? Very simple answer. Because we don't truly believe in what we just said. If a person really believed that on Yom Kippur he is reborn, he is starting anew, everything in the past is erased. Of course, after Yom Kippur, he would feel the purification. And our job on Yom Kippur is to start believing in the spirit of purification that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings down to the world Yom Kippur. To believe that a person is mischadesh, he becomes new, just like he's just born. He opens up a new page. It's not what it was. He is a new mensch if a person will truly believe it. He will repeat this Mishnah hundreds of times until he goes into his heart. Ma mikveh metayres atmeim, just like the mikveh purifies those who are impure. Af HaKadosh Baruch Hu metayres Yisrael, so too HaKadosh Baruch Hu purifies Klal Yisrael. Don't have any connection to the past. You're a different person. Of course, you will feel it after Yom Kippur. There's a different explanation to the Mishnah we just quoted. Amar Rabbi Akiva, Ashreichem Yisrael. Praiseworthy are you, Klal Yisrael. Says Rabbi Akiva, Lifnei mi atem mitarim. In front of whom do you purify yourselves? Umi metayer esem, and who purifies you? We all know that one who sinks down to the 50th gate of Tumah cannot be purified. That is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu quickly took Klal Yisrael out of Egypt when they were at the 49th level of Tumah. However, the Arizal reveals that this is only before Matan Torah. After Matan Torah, you can even come up from the 50th level of Tumah. This is what this Mishnah says. Amar Rabbi Akiva said, Ashreichem Yisrael lifnei mi atem mitaharim. In front of whom you purify yourselves. Lifnei, before, mi. Mi is mem yud, mem is 40, yud is 10, that is 50. Lifnei mi, if you don't reach yet the level of 50, atem mitaharim, you can purify yourselves. However, umi, but once you reach that mi, the mem yud level, the 50th level, metayer esem HaKadosh Baruch Hu will purify you. If you reach the 50th level, avichem shebashamayim, our collective Father in Shamayim, because kud shabrichu ve'oraisa chadhu, that is the koyach of Torah. So the koyach of Torah says the Arizal, you can even pull yourself up from the 50th level of Tumah. So we have to start changing. How do you do that? By small, little kabbalos. Resolutions you have to accept in yourself. Small, not big. If it's big, that's actually the advice of Yetzer Hara, because Yetzer Hara knows that you won't be able to stick to it. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, you give up. And you get so frustrated, you weren't able to continue with it. And not only do you not move up, you actually go down. That's the advice of Yetzer Hara. And therefore, the best thing to do is to accept in yourselves small resolutions. How important is it to accept of yourself a small resolution? Listen to Chidushei Harim, Ilay Ploim, Mamish amazing. In Yuma Daf Pei Dal Amud Beis, Ksubis Daf Tes Amud Beis, and other places, we learn. We have a rule, Kol Kavua Kemechza Al Mechza Dami, something which is set, doesn't move. Skavua, it's viewed as if it's half and half, even though it's not really half and half. It's a tiny, minute amount. If you accept something on yourself and it's kavua, you stick to it no matter what, no compromises, then it's kavua. And kol kavua kemechza mechza dami. So then you're half and half on the scale, and all you need now is one more mitzvah to tilt the scales. That could be easy. And let's say you couldn't. You didn't add one more mitzvah. Don't worry, says the Chidush Erim, because in Maseches Rosh Hashanah, Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, we learn, V'rav chesed mateh klapei chesed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so merciful. When you're exactly equal on the scale, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tilts the scale to the schus, and now you have a majority of mitzvahs, and now we have another rule. In Nazir Daf Mem Beis, Holios Daf Gimel Amud Beis, Chulin Yutes Amud Aleph, Ruboi kechuloi. When you have the majority of something, it's viewed as if the entire thing. Look what a little Kabbalah did for us. You took upon yourself a little Kabbalah, you became half and half. Kol kavua kemechza al mechza. All you need is to add one more mitzvah. You can do it. You can do it. And if you don't, Kodesh Baruch Hu will do it for you, because the Kodesh Baruch Hu is mateh klapei chesed. He's going to tilt the scales for you. Now you have the majority of schusim, mitzvahs. Majority? Great. Ruboi kechuloi. Ruboi kechuloi, that means your entire bag is only of good deeds and no avails at all. And that is the unbelievable significance of accepting on yourself great resolutions. But once you do, you must stick to them at all costs. What does that mean, to stick to a resolution at all costs? The Brei Menachem, the Geri Rebbe, once accepted on himself a nice chumrah. He said to himself, I will not speak after I say the bedtime Shema. Not after Hamapim. After you say the blessing of Hamapim, you're not allowed to speak, whether you like it or not. That's the halacha. But he accepted it himself not to speak after the Kriyas Shema. After the saying the bedtime Shema. Great. Nice chumrah. But then one night he said the bedtime Shema, and his father, the Imri Emes, the Ger Rebbe, calls him. Houston, we have a problem. Your father calls you? It's kibudav. Kibudav is dioraisa. Not to speak after Kriyat Shema is beautiful, but that's just a nice chumrah. Now what do? But we said, once you accepted yourself something, you must stick to it at all costs. So the Bnei Menachem decided, I won't initiate a conversation, but if my father asks me something, he wants me to come to him. If he asks me something, I'm going to have to respond. And that's what happened. He went to his father, and his father asked him something, so he had to answer. He had to answer. But what's going to be with my Kabbalah? I accepted that I don't speak after Kriyat Shema. You know what he did? He didn't go to sleep that night. Wait a second. I accepted on myself not to speak after the bedtime Shema. It comes out that it was never a bedtime Shema. It was just, I said it Kriyat Shema in the evening. I never went to sleep. I didn't go to sleep, it's not a bedtime Shema. It comes out that he stuck to his resolution. Shimshon Pinkus Zatzal, he accepted of himself once that he will never say benching after his bread by heart. Always from a siddur, from a bencher, and that's a great Kabbalah. That's a great Kabbalah to accept it yourself. Because Sefer HaChinuch and Mitzvah Taf Lamed writes that we has a Kabbalah. Sefer HaChinuch says, I have a Kabbalah from my Rebbe's, that if one is meticulous to say benching carefully with kavanah, he will never be lacking parnasa. It's a measure for measure. You say thank you for what you have. Kodesh Baruch Hu will shower you with more. And anyways, Pinkus knows how to say benching by heart, but he decided, I will always say it from a siddur or a bencher. But what can you do? He was once stuck. He went to a Sheva Brachos in a room, not a shul, not a house. They didn't have any benchers there. No siddurim, no benchers. He has a problem. Benching is the oraisa. Pasuk says, you eat, say shit, you have to bench. It's the oraisa. And to say benching only from the bencher of the siddur is a great chumrah. But that's what it is. It's a chumrah. And this is a dioraisa. What do? Shimshon Pinkus, quick thinking, he has a solution. He took a piece of paper, he took a pen, and he wrote down the entire benching. Don't worry, he knows it by heart. He wrote it down, and now he was able to say benching from that piece of paper. He didn't say it by heart. Rabbi Friedman from Lakewood once came to the Stipler many years ago. Motzei Yom Kippur. Stipler was hard of hearing, so he wrote on a piece of paper the books that he wants to buy off the Stipler, the Kehilos Yaakov that the Stipler authored. And the Stipler looks at this paper, this piece of paper, and it says the names of the books, and he says to him, I'm sorry, I can't sell them to you now. And Rabbi Friedman said, but why not? The Stipler says, I have this minhag, I accepted on myself not to deal with any business transactions, any coins, when I'm wearing my Shabbos attire. It was Motzei Yom Kippur. He was still wearing his Shabbos, his Yom Tov attire. So Rabbi Friedman said, but why not? And the Stipler explained, maybe I won't be careful. I put some coins in my pocket. They'll stay there until next Shabbos. And on Shabbos, I'm going to be carrying some coins. So I don't do any business that has to do with coins, with money, when I'm still wearing my Shabbos clothes. So Rabbi Friedman says to him, but I'm going back to the States tomorrow. And you know what? I'll make sure that you don't put any coins in your garment. The disciple said, wait a second, I'll be back. And he left the room. 5, 10 minutes later, the disciple comes back after 10 minutes. And Rabbi Friedman noticed that the disciple changed everything that he was wearing, including the talis cotton, including the yarmulke. He changed it all to weekday attire. Now he can do business with him. Because when you accepted yourself a Kabbalah, you got to stick to it at all costs, no matter what. So if you got to stick to your Kabbalah at all costs, how much more so? Kal v'chomer ben bno shel kal v'chomer. How much more so you have to stick to the mitzvahs themselves? What's the significance of that? Let me ask you a question. The mitzvahs, we have a ton of mitzvahs, 613. Are the mitzvahs chukim or mishpatim? A chok is something we don't understand. A mishpat is something we understand. It has a reason. Let me ask you, you can unmute your mics. Are our mitzvahs chukim or mishpatim? Is the mitzvah something we can understand or something we can't understand? What do you say?
Which mitzvot?
We have 613. You tell me. And generally speaking, are the mitzvahs chukim or mishpatim?
Yesh v'yesh.
Yesh v'yesh. Some are chukim and some are mishpatim. Really? Are you so sure? What about the mitzvah of Pesach? Is Pesach a chok or a mishpat? Does it make sense or not? Pesach.
It's two different questions. Is it a chok or mishpat, or does it make sense? It's two different questions.
Chok is something we cannot understand. So to us, it doesn't make sense. It's just a decree from Hashem. A mishpat is something we understand. It makes sense to us. Anyways, we're going to try to keep them all, but does it make sense? Does it have any logic that we can digest? What about the mitzvah of Pesach?
There's a logic that we came out of Egypt.
I'm sorry?
There's a logic that we came out of Mitzrayim.
Seemingly, that's what the Torah says in Parshas Boy. V'haya hayom hazeh lachem lezikaron. You heard what we said? V'haya hayom hazeh lachem lezikaron. Remember. What should you remember? You came out of Mitzrayim, remember? V'chagoysem oso chag la'Hashem l'doyroiseichem. You should celebrate it forever. But then suddenly the Torah throws in these words. Chukas oilam tochaguhu. It's a choik. Well, wait a second. If it's a zikaron, a remembrance for what happened, why is it called a choik? The Torah repeats it a few psukim later. U'shemartem es hamatzos. Why? Ki be'etzem hayom hazeh hotzesi et tzivoiseichem me'eretz Mitzrayim. Remember, I took you out of Egypt today, and the Torah continues the same pasuk. U'shmartem es hayom hazeh l'doroiseichem chukas oilam. The Torah calls it a chok again. Well, wait a second. Is it a choik? Or is it a mishpat? Chok means there is no given reason. We can understand it. There are many mitzvahs that we can say that make a lot of sense. Like Shemitah. After 6 years, you leave the ground, don't touch it. Great. Rejuvenates, makes a lot of sense, right? What about Shabbos? You work for 6 days, and then we give you 1 day rest. That's how it is all over the world. That's very logical. And yet, all the mitzvahs are chukim. Nothing makes sense. What do I mean? Take again the mitzvah of Shemitah. In Baba Basra and the Gemara we learn, in many other places. In the old agriculture, they wouldn't plant every single year, because if you do so, you deplete the ground from its minerals. The land has to rest. So they used to plant 1 year and let it rest for another. Plant for 1 year and rest for another. In the past, the land would get its minerals from leaves, from other parts of vegetation that rots, or animals that leave some souvenirs for the ground. But today, the modern agriculture, where they harvest almost the entire thing, there's nothing left. And therefore you need an external intervention. You need some fertilization, chemical or organic. So back then, they actually, in a cycle of 7 years, would rest 4 years. The first year they would plant, and then the second they would rest. The third year they would plant, and the fourth they would rest. And the fifth year they would plant, and the sixth year they would rest. And then comes Shemitah. You rest again. 4 years of resting out of a cycle of 7. How exactly are you supposed to get parnasa? Comes the Torah and says, listen, but if you plant for 6 years straight, your fields, your vineyards, and then you'll collect the grain, so then on the 6th year, you'll have 3 times as much. That doesn't make any sense. The land is completely depleted from all its energy. We squeezed it really well. So now it's going to make 3 times the amount? How is that possible? What about the mitzvah of Shabbos? Take a farmer. On Friday, he's in the middle of harvesting, and suddenly he hears the news, Motzei Shabbos, a major storm is coming. He must finish. He was plowing. He wasn't harvesting. He was plowing, and now he must finish and plant before the rain comes. But in a few hours, Shabbos Malkita, Shabbos is coming. He won't be able to finish. And everything that he could have had this year will not grow. So he runs to the rabbi and he says, Rabbi, give me a little discount. One Shabbos, just one Shabbos I won't keep. And you know what? Then I'll keep Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. The rabbi won't agree unless he's a reform rabbi. In other words, because of one day, he can miss the entire season. Does that make sense? Generally speaking, the mitzvahs make sense. But if you look at the details, it doesn't make sense. Look at another example. Lo signovu. Don't steal. Parshas Kedoshim. That makes a lot of sense. But wait a second. What do you do to a ganav? If he says, I didn't do it, and witnesses come, he will pay double. Is there any difference if he stole from a very poor person, he stole his lunch for the next 2 days, and this guy's wife had a nervous breakdown? No shalom bayis there. They're almost starving to death. Is there a difference between this guy who stole from this house or a guy who came to the house of Bill Gates and he took a few diamonds worth $1 million and Bill Gates doesn't even feel? Same punishment? Does that make sense? Well, what can you do? Din puta ke din mea. $1 or $100, they're all the same. The thief who stole from the poor guy is so cruel. 100 times more than the other guy who came to the house of Bill Gates. We're not recommending stealing from Bill Gates, Khalila. But that doesn't make sense. Says the Dubner Magid, all the mitzvahs are chukim. Even those mitzvahs that we understand it. The Torah gave some kind of a reason, so it'll be easier for us to digest it. But the real reason to do the mitzvah is because the Kodesh Baruch Hu commanded us to do it. One more example is Parshas Mishpatim has all the laws of Choshed Mishpat. The name of the Parsha suggests that the mitzvahs in the Parsha are ones that we can understand. Parshas Mishpatim, they're Mishpatim, we understand it. But if we pay close attention, there's almost no mitzvah in the Parsha that is not a chok. For example, the dinim of bor. Somebody opens up a pit in the middle of Rishus Harabim, an ox and its vessels fall inside and break. The owner of the bor has to pay for the show, but he's exempt for the vessels. Why? If the owner of this place, the pit, he opened up, he didn't cover it properly, so let him pay for the vessels as well. And so on and so forth in so many cases. When he wasn't careful with fire, Nizkei Esh. And the fire went and burned down the entire Gadish of his neighbor. And Chazal say, Tamun is exempt. If there was a big pile of grain and somebody else, even someone else came, and before the fire reached the pile, he took something and covered it, one who was not careful with the fire is patur. But why? An ox that's gored. The nevela, the carcass belongs to the one that it belonged to him before, and he must take care of it. But that doesn't make sense. If you hit your neighbor's car, do we tell the one who was just damaged, go take care of your car? You take care of him. The person who did it should take care of him. The dinim of shoimrim, we have a rule in Baal of Imoy, patur, he doesn't have to pay. If you borrow something, but the owner was with you, if the owner gave you a glass of water at the time that he lent you the vessel, and something happened, you're exempt. Why? Hashavas Aveda, returning a lost item. It's a mitzvah. That makes sense. It's a mishpat. But you know that if a person hears the person who lost something yelling, "Oi, Vayle chesron kis. Oh, what I lost. In Bab Metziach Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, we learned that is called Yush. He just gave up ownership, which means someone who will find this item now can take it to his house. Even though you know your friend is very upset, he'll be very happy to get it back. The one who found it doesn't have to give it back. There was a Yush. That too seems like a chok b'li tam. Chok, no reason. In general, all the dinim of Chosh and Mishpat, we find in Sanhedrin Daf with base is a mitzvah to do a pshara, make a compromise between the two litigants. That is how it's passed in Chosh and Mishpat, Siman Yud Beis, Seif Beis. It's a mitzvah on the judge to speak to the litigants to say, make some kind of a compromise. Why? Why don't we say, Yikov Hadina Sahar? If he's right, he's right. If he's wrong, he's wrong. Says the Dubner Magid, all the mitzvahs are chukim, even those mitzvahs that has a reason. The Torah says, chukas oilam. In these mitzvahs that the Torah says, there's a reason. The Torah adds, it's a choik. But because they're all chukim, we have a great case against the Satan. We have again a great claim. And Rosh Hashanah, and we will say this again on Yom Kippur, we turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and we say, in the absence of an advocate against the one who reports the transgressions, the prosecuting agent, the Satan, so what? There's nothing good to say about us. So we say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tagid leYaakov dvar chok u'mishpat, and because of that, v'tzadkenu b'mishpat, may you testify for the sake of Yaakov's offspring regarding their observance of your decrees and laws, thereby may you vindicate us in judgment. Whoa, wait a second. We just said, there is nothing good to say about you. No schusim. No. Just like we never asked why. We just fulfilled the mitzvahs, which are chok, with no reason. Even when it didn't make any sense to us. So to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you should make us win in judgment, even though there is no reason. In other words, if the Satan comes and says, but wait a second, Kodesh Baruch Hu, you know what they did? Even if his claims are right, and even if the Satan asks, but why? You'll say to him, it's a choik, just like they fulfilled my chukim, which in their eyes didn't make any sense, so too, even when it doesn't make any sense to you, I will say, and because of that, v'tzadkenu b'mishpat, just because we stick to the mitzvahs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though it maybe doesn't make any too much sense to us, that in itself is our ticket to a good judgment in Mitzvah Shem and Rosh Hashanah, and obviously coming on Yom Kippur. You know, in these days, we keep saying, Al tashlichenu le'es zikna, kichlos kochenu al ta'azveinu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Don't leave us when we are old, when we don't have any more koyach. So does that mean a person who's 20 and 30 and 40 doesn't need to say it? He's full of vigor, full of life, full of energy. So who should say this? Well, what's the age that you can start saying it? Al tashlichenu le'es zikna. You want a 15-year-old to say it with all the kavanos in the world? Like a 75-year-old man? How does that work? My friends, there's an amazing Rashi on this. It comes from a pasuk in Tehillim, Ayin Aleph pasuk Tes. The pshat is not what we think. Al tashlichenu le'es zikna doesn't mean don't leave me when I'm old, when I don't have any more koyach. Listen to the words of Rashi. Le'es zikna. Im zakanti b'chatoim keloimar shechatasi harbe. At the time of old age means if I have aged with sins, meaning I have sinned exceedingly. Everyone can say this comfortably. Al tashlichenu le'es zikna, when I'm loaded, full of sins, just like an old person is full of years, loaded with many, many years. So this includes everyone. Aboisai, we must fulfill all the mitzvahs. All the mitzvahs. What does that mean? The Piasetzner Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, Hashem Yikom Domai, murdered in the Holocaust. We have one of his diaries, and he writes to himself. He actually writes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was 40 years old. And he writes a very moving letter. He writes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I would like to give you something big. But what can I give you? Should I daven with more kavanah? I try to daven with all the kavanah that I can muster. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I want to give you something big. But what can I give you? Should I learn more? I learn every free minute that I have. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I would like to give you something really big. I would like to convert for you. But what can I do? I was born Jewish. You were born Jewish. What does that mean to convert for HaKadosh Baruch Hu? When a convert comes to the Beis Din and he says, I'd like to convert, and they say to him, after the whole process is complete, listen, you realize we have 613 mitzvahs. And we have thousands of mitzvahs, the Rabbanon. You accept them all? What if the convert says, I accept them all except one? Except one. I just, this is something I'm not crazy about, We say to him, well, go look for another religion. You're not welcome here. You need to accept them all. 613 from the Torah and all the mitzvahs the Rabbanon. But what if he says, but I really love this religion. I believe in it. And I'm willing to take everything upon myself except for one. And we will say no. Just imagine. A convert comes to the Beis Din. Tomorrow is the big day. He's going to go into the mikveh. And the Av Beis Din is talking to him and says, so, do you accept all the mitzvahs? And this future convert says to him, Av Beis Din, I want to be like you. That's not what I asked you. I asked you, are you willing to accept upon yourself all the mitzvahs, Teoraisa and the Rabbanon? And this convert looks at the Av Beis Din and says, Av Beis Din, I want to be like you. He says, what do you mean? What kind of an answer is that? Imagine. The convert says to him, listen, I'm terribly sorry, but yesterday I was here, Mincha Ma'ariv, between Mincha Ma'ariv, I overheard you speaking to someone, and I overheard you saying Lashon Hara. I want to be like you, Av Beis Din. I want to be able to say I'm Jewish, but to do whatever I want. I want to be able to accept everything except Lashon Hara. Apparently, Rabbanim, Dayanim are allowed to say Lashon Hara. Will we accept it? Of course not. So why is it that we are allowed to pick and choose? Should the convert be better than us? What's the difference between us? We must accept on ourselves all the mitzvahs. And in fact, we can convert for the sake of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. How do you convert? By accepting on yourself. Stick to all the mitzvahs. All the mitzvahs. The Oraisa and the Rabbanon. In Musaf of Yom Kippur, we say that tefillah that the Kohen Gadol used to say on Yom Kippur. And it says there, Al Anshei HaSharon Haya Oimer Shelo Ya'asu Bateihem Kivreihem. Used to have a special tefillah for the people living in the Sharon region, that their homes should not become their graves. What does that mean? The source to this is from Yerushalmi Perek Hey Halacha Beis. Yerushalmi explained, Sharon region is a valley between two big mountains. And the material that they would use to build their homes when it would rain, would be a lot of rain. All the rain would wash down from the mountains and would destroy their homes. It was very dangerous. So the special tefillah, the Yom Kippur, that the Kohen Gadol davens for these people. But wait a second, don't we have a better solution for them? Move out! Why you keep living there if you know it's dangerous? It's a sakana. What would a person from the Sharon region would answer us? Well, what do you mean? I've been living here for many years. My father's from here, my grandfather's from here. We're 6 generations here. So what? It's dangerous. The Kohen Gadol has to say a special prayer for you. Yeah, but I'm used to it. Maybe that's the reason the Kohen Gadol says this on Yom Kippur. It's not just speaking to the people living there in that region, speaking to all of us. Shelo ya'asu bateihem kivreihem, their homes, in other words, what they're used to. Regular routine, let that not become their grave. You have to change. If you realize something is wrong, step out of it. You have the koyach to do so, especially during these days. About 20 years ago, there was an amazing article in the newspaper about special projects of the city of Tel Aviv. They decided many people in their backyards have all kinds of garbage and have to get rid of it. One of the yards belonged to a very old man, and he was a hoarder. For 30 years, he would go on his tricycle and he would just go from garbage to garbage, collecting more and more junk. And he brought it back home, and he had this gigantic pile, 30 years worth of toiling, collect all the garbage in Tel Aviv. Can't imagine what type of junk he had. And this pile was 3-story high. It's gigantic. And the city estimated that they're going to need 50 trucks to get rid of it. So you can understand such a big pile of garbage was very alive. Rats, all kinds of crawling things, even snakes. And every so often they came to visit the neighbors, and everybody got very upset. The neighbors used to complain again and again and again. And the city decided finally they're going to make an end to it. So they sent this old man a letter. Specific date, we're going to come, and we're going to get rid of all the garbage there. And this old man was so upset. No one will touch my assets. No one will come in here. And if somebody's going to come here, surely I won't be able to stand it. I'm going to get a heart attack because of you. He tried to go to court. Nothing worked. And when they came, the city, they came with 50 trucks. He stumped his feet and he yelled. And he tried to tell them, don't get out of here, get out, it's trespassing. But what can he do? What can he do? The police came and they took him away. And they were able to get rid of everything he had. It took a long time. But the city didn't stop there. The city sent some fellows to plant nice vegetation of beautiful, beautiful flowers, grass, and some trees. They even put some benches so you should be able to sit and relax. Sprinklers, it was beautiful. And then when everything was said and done, they released him and they let him go back home. A few months later, one of the reporters of that newspaper decided to go back to the old person and to see how he's doing. And did he in fact get the heart attack that he was saying that he will. He came close and he saw this old man is sitting in his beautiful yard, enjoying every second of it. So he came close and he says, so how are you doing in this new place? And the old man says, you kidding? This is life after death. This is amazing. Do you know that after 30 years, I actually found out that sun rises at 5 a.m. and out at 10 a.m. That big pile of garbage covered the sun until 10 a.m. More than that, for 30 years, I barely breathed. Imagine the amounts of dust that was here. Snake and the rats and the mice and everything. They came to my house. It was disgusting. Now it's great. Fresh air. I feel like I became younger, 30 years younger than I was. Let's ask ourselves, where was this old man for 30 years? He didn't see all the crawling things in his yard. He didn't see the snakes. He didn't see the mice. He didn't see that they all come into his house. How did he not feel that he is living inside garbage pile? The answer is one who is in the middle of a garbage pile doesn't feel that it's garbage. He doesn't feel it. When the Yetzer Hara lives with the person, it's not his guest, it becomes himself. And then a person doesn't even feel that it's the Yetzer Hara. It's immersed in a big pile of garbage. And we all have our own pile of garbage. And it's very hard for us to get rid of those assets that we have accumulated. We got used to them. And we ask ourselves, we're afraid, what's going to be? How can I be without them? But we must jump into the water. And when we will feel alive, free from the shackles of the Yetzer Hara. Younger, 30 years younger. Fresh air. We are finally released. During these days, we keep saying, Hashivenu Hashem Elecha v'nashuva. Chadesh yameinu kekedem. Restore our days as your past. What is kekedem? Like kedem. What is kedem? Kedem is wine. Grape juice. But we want to go back to being in the grape juice factory. What does that mean? Ke, like kedem. In the Sfarim HaKadmonim, it says the word kedem is an acronym. It's a Rashi Tevos. Kuf is Cain, Daled is David, and Mem is Menashe. Cain sinned with shfichus damim, spilled the blood of his brother. David, according to the lofty level that he was, not that we understand it, and Chazal say anyone who says David sinned is wrong, but what it says in the Navi, David said sin with Gilui Arayos, immorality. Menashe, he sinned with Avodah Zarah, and we spoke about Menashe extensively 2 weeks ago. But these people did tshuva, and it was erased. How much more so that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will erase our sins? In Parashas Chayei Sarah, first pasuk, Vayu Chayei Sarah. How old was she? 100 Shana. ve'esrim shana ve'sheva shanim. She was 127 years old. Shnei chaye Sarah. This is the life of Sarah. Rashi says, what does it mean? Shnei chaye Sarah. Kulan shavin letoiva. They're all equally good. Great. Asks, Das zekeni mibale atoises. Wait a second. These same words, Shnei chaye Sarah, appears in this pasha, in Chaye Sarah, about Yishmael. Ve'ele Shnei chaye Yishmael. Do you want to say they're all equally good? If Shnei chaye means they're all equally good, so when it talks about Yishmael in the same manner, it means the same. How can you do that? How can you say that? But Das zekeni mibale atoises. Say a remarkable answer. Yes, because Chazal tell us that Yishmael did tshuva. So he's like a ger shenisgaya kekatan shenoila. New convert. A convert is like a new baby, is a new entity. And therefore, the Das Zakenim say, all the evil that he did before is not counted anymore. And it's as if he's been doing tshuva his whole life. We are much closer to Sarah Imenu than to Yishmael. And if Yishmael has a new life, kulan shavim letoiva. What about us? So we love looking for segulas. Who doesn't like a good segula? I'm going to review the greatest segula in the world for Yom Kippur. This segula is from the Leket Yosher. The Leket Yosher is the Talmud of Tumas Hadesha, one of the Rishonim. And in Chelek Aleph Oachaim, page Kuflav base, he says an unbelievable thing. He says what the Tumas Hadesha said on Shabbos Shuvah, coming up in a few days, just going back a few years ago. There's a pasuk in Mishlei. The pasuk says, Marve Hashem choinen dal. One who gives money to the ani. If you give charity to the poor, you are as if lending money to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu's job to sustain the poor person, but you did it for him. So now HaKadosh Baruch Hu owes you. You are the lender, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the borrower. The pasuk continues, Ugemuloi yeshalem loy. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu now owes you. So now, if you gave tzedakah, you are the lender, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the borrower. In Masechet Sanhedrin in Perek Zeber, we learn that if the lender says to the borrower, I want to take you to the Beis Din HaGadol, the borrower has to walk after the lender. Why? Because there's another pasuk in Mishlei, Eved loive leish malve. The borrower is a slave to the lender. Says the Tumas Hadesha. This is also said about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if it wasn't Tumas Hadesha saying this, we would not be able to say this. Yom Hadin, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to judge us, we say, whoa, wait a second. We are the lender. We say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you are the borrower. We want to go to Beis Din HaGadol. That is Beis Din of Midas HaRachamim. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is forced as if to go with us to Beis Din of Midas HaRachamim. And therefore, says the Tumas Hadesha, every person should give tzedakah in order for him to be the lender and not the borrower. So he can as if force HaKadosh Baruch Hu to take him to the Beis Din HaGadol of Midas HaRachamim. Immense Hashem, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will shower us with chesed and rachamim, with gezeiros toivos. We should all be, Immense Hashem, sealed to a wonderful year. Gmar chasima toiva to all of you. I want to say thank you to Rav Horvitz and to all the participants. It's such a big schus to learn together these past few months. It's a tremendous, remarkable schus, true privilege, and I really appreciate it, and I thank you. Gmar chasima toiva to you all.